All right, so hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to Refresh. This is a time to connect, be inspired, learn something, and ultimately feel a bit better for this time spent together. And I have to tell you, I wrote that line when we started this show, and Christina doesn't know this, but really it emanates from something she once said about Generation W, because this is what Generation's all about. He said, if you can spend one day and you feel a little taller, you kick yourself in the butt, you feel a little better, then it's all worth it. And actually, it is. It's all worth it. Now you're here with us today. So where are we? It's the last week of October. How did that happen? I sometimes wonder that I will look back on this year, and as much as it's going on, I feel like it's the lost year, and yet it's a lost and found year. Maybe I should put that, I'll talk about that another time. But the question is, do we need to take an accounting? Let's see. We got pandemic, check. Surging, check. Election, 8 days and counting, check. I went to see my doctor yesterday for a check in and a check up, and I had to confess that I think I have COVID at least a few times a month. Does anybody else feel that way? There's actually no rational reason. I have a thermometer downstairs. I have a thermometer upstairs. If I may scroll, I mean, honestly, it's crazy. I'm not at the bar. I am supporting restaurants with lots of takeout, but there is this sense of fear, right? That undermines our underlying sense of well-being. And as much as we want to ignore it or say it's not there, she had a wonderful way of reminding me and helping me understanding that it's there, but I can help myself. We all can. She said, just be smart. Like, for example, masks are a good thing. Not a bad thing. They're a good thing. They help. Social distancing, a good thing. Taking vitamin D, an essential thing. And I don't want, taking vitamin D. I'll just leave it at that. Read on it. And most of all, she said, Donna, give yourself a break. Now, that's something we hear often, especially on this show. We talk about personal grace, having gratitude, but it's like, honestly, it's not even enough. When somebody looks at you and really cares about you and says, give yourself a break, you hear it. You hear it. And so I'm going to give this and share this wonderful message from my doctor to you, from me. Give yourself a break, right? A little bit of grace and a little bit of gratitude. And so I will take a new accounting for this afternoon. For the gratitude I feel for the gathering of the Generation W team this week to talk about how we can make our best and most positive impact on the world. For friends and a board who care deeply about furthering our work and supporting us to be our best selves. Again and again, taking the time to think about what's good in your life. We don't do it enough, and we don't internalize it enough, right? That should be a check every day. And when the world feels like it's closing in, be sure to bust your way out. Focus on others, on how you can help, right? I always thought when you are outside of yourself, not only do you do some of your best work, but you feel connected in a way that's incredibly powerful. And so I guess it reminds me today of Lisa Tepper, who sent me this great text earlier this morning. And she said, she's an accomplished business executive, so you know who she is. She lives in New Jersey, right? Who has a heart of gold, and every Wednesday spends time with a great group of high schoolers in New York City from the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis High School in Times Square. Pretty cool. JKO. I don't know, do you guys have like a mascot or something so we can cheer along with you? I had a chance to teach a class a few months back, and they actually taught me a lot, but today they are joining us. So Lisa and Karen and your students, welcome. We're so happy to see you, and we know that you'll fill the chat up with lots of brilliant comments and questions, and our spectacular women will be ready to take them on. Of course, my final gratitude is to be here with all of you. There is a warmth that pervades. Trisha Melly said it. She goes, I am ready for, like, what did she say? I have to read this. I am ready. I feel the energy for a fabulous hour with all of you. I could not have said it better. Matter of fact, Trisha, I'm going to use your words, because I am so happy to be here with you and to be kind of embraced in the comfort that we all share in this power of connection and the power that human connection brings. And yes, it's a Zoom, but you know what? The energy you'll feel, it doesn't matter. It will transcend, because today there are 3 remarkable women. We just recently celebrated the Hispanic Heritage Month, and we love to celebrate, especially with great women. Each of them have a very unique story, a very unique American story shaped by their Latina roots. We hear a lot about the Hispanic population. 60 million plus people and growing, 18% of our population, and the largest minority population in the United States. Well, what does that all mean? What does it mean for each of them? It's a very personal story. And for all of us who will help us personalize this story of Hispanics, Latinas in America today. So let me introduce to you Aide Chavez Frescas. She is an influencer, a very powerful influencer, and CEO of Be My Social. And a good friend to us. She actually worked with us in the Generation W offices on our social for a period of time before heading north to New York City, where she is just making it in a big way. Marta Pritalt, a senior vice president of FIS, a Fortune 500 fintech company, and a member of our Generation WOW advisory board, a big believer in women and girls. And she's also one of two senior women in technology, which we'll talk about, in a fintech company. So very interesting in terms of the work she does and the positions that she has. And then finally, last but not least, Christina Norman. She's the head of content for the NBA Players Association, a former head of, did you do both MTV and VH1? Okay, in their heyday, we should say, in their heyday. The former CEO of Oprah Winfrey Network. And currently, she is, how come I didn't write it down? She is the head, she heads up content for the NBA Players Association. I think I just said that. So you can tell, incredible women, very different women. And I'm gonna let them actually introduce themselves to you in a much deeper way so we can learn about Aide, Marta, and Christina. Hi, ladies.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, so let's just weigh right in. Aide, you used a word to describe yourself as a border child. Tell us about you and your roots and coming to America.
Yes, so I moved. So the reason that I use those words is because I was born in Texas, but I lived my whole life in Mexico and came to the States for college. But I have lived my life in the middle, in the border, you know. So I'm a Mexican girl that used to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It was part of my culture as well. I celebrated Halloween too. Like, I am Mexican, but I also have a lot of the American culture with me. And yeah, I mean, that's why I say I'm a border child.
So, okay, and we'll come back, we'll talk more about that. Marta, you are obviously, no, it's not obviously, you are not born in America, and you are not an American citizen, but you live and work in America. So tell us your story.
I do. I was born in Colombia, and when I was 14, my mom passed away of breast cancer. And before she died, she asked what I wanted to do, and she wanted me to have a better future. So she made sure that I was able to go to school in Canada. So I did a BA and an engineering degree in Canada and lived there for most of my life. In those critical formative years, my thinking was shaped by Canadians. And then I got an amazing opportunity to come and work for FIS, and the headquarters are in Jacksonville. And at the beginning, I was in denial, and I said, no, I'll commute and it'll be okay. And then, when 6 months had gone by and I wasn't spending much time at home, I said, what am I doing? I just need to buy a house and move down. And I've been in Jacksonville now for 5 years, and it's been wonderful, but it's been very different as well.
That's amazing, right? That's amazing. So Colombian, Canadian transplant, Jacksonville, Florida. Oh my goodness.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. And Christina.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
We're here.
I am a born and bred New Yorker, so shout out to the JKO students.
Yay! The Panthers, by the way, the Panthers.
The JKO Panthers. I was born and raised in the Bronx. My mother is Puerto Rican, and my father is from the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I definitely had a different kind of border situation, but definitely felt a foot in a few different worlds as somebody who was, raised in a very multicultural community, very Latina community, and yet had this strong West Indian side as well. So very influenced from a Caribbean point of view, I guess I would say, and everything that means, from food to family to celebrations, etc. But also to you know, a desire to achieve and to you know, do more, do better, and to sort of embrace this American dream, even though we were sort of, yes, born here, but definitely not always looked at as equal Americans.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, I said we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Who does that, do you guys celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? Is that a thing, or is that yet another made up social construct for, I don't know, maybe it has good purposes, but how do you guys look and experience that?
It's new to me.
Okay, Marta?
It's new to me. I don't believe, I'm in Toronto right now, actually visiting, and I don't believe here we really ever talked about Latin American Month or Hispanic Heritage Month. I celebrate it all year round. Love the place where I come from, love my culture, love my music, love my language, love my literature. So I honestly celebrate it year round. So for me, the whole concept of this month and celebrating months off is something that I'm learning with moving to the United States.
But what are you learning?
So I think people ask me more about it because now it's in the forefront. So at work, I get more questions and more interest, and I think I'm learning to share more about who I am, because I think there's a misconception of what Hispanics and Latinos are in the United States, and we see them in the media, and I think a lot of people assume that, you know, we're not educated or we only have certain skill sets to offer, and it's not true, right? So I love that people are curious, and I love that people are asking questions, because it gives me the opportunity to influence in a positive way.
Ajay?
Yeah, I never have celebrated it. No, I don't have that. I mean, I understand why, and I understand the importance of it, but at the same time, it's just has never been part of my life. And I mean, it's just, in the same thing with my family or the people around me that are also Latinos, like we're just always talking about it. So it's just kind of, it's who we are. So there's no a real necessity of like having the dates or the month. But I'm glad we have it.
But when you say you're always talking about it, what are you always talking about?
Yeah, you know, like issues that we're dealing with, that everything that is happening. You know, currently politically, I mean, we're talking about it. We know, and it's important. It's important for us to vote. It's important for all this stuff. But it's not, and also our history, because also that gets erased. You know, like where we come from, how everything it happened, especially for somebody that is from the border and has seen how the border was cross us. We didn't cross the border, right? So like
that's a great point. Explain that. That's a really great point.
Yeah, I mean, my family we're from Chihuahua, but there was a time that we were all one, and there was no border really, you know? And so once the border crossed, some of them are in America and some of them are in Chihuahua. So now we have a border, and we have half of them are in Texas and the other half are in Chihuahua. So it's just kind of like an interesting part of where I come from. And we have adjusted, and we know we have to do, you know, the documents, whatever you need, you have to do it, we do it. But at the same time, it's just has been a little interesting that the composition of that.
Right. So when you look at your family, you go back into the 1800s. When I don't know exactly when we changed the border. which is a polite way of saying, your family was all, everybody was Mexican, right?
Yeah. Everybody is the same. Like we're all the same. And then literally they created, like they separated it. And so half of them stay in Texas and half of them are here. And you can see it within, like even now, like my brother, the oldest, was born in Mexico and I was born in Texas. It's just like little things like that. We're all like a mix. And I am Mexican, but I am American too, because I was born here. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's just really, really interesting. And half of my family has, like I say, they're like in the States and half of them are in Mexico. So it's just, yeah.
Right. Okay. And so as a Mexican woman, what kind of connectivity do you feel to the Puerto Rican woman or the Colombian woman? I mean, Christina, like we're trying to get at this whole idea of being this overall banner, and yet you guys have such unique stories.
Well, I think that's the beauty of it, right? Everybody has a unique story. And I think that, you know, Marta was talking about this yesterday, and that the Canadians sort of have they celebrate diversity in a different way and are sort of interested about it. I think I'm excited when I meet other Latina women who are accomplished and achieving, because that makes you feel like, you know, okay, like I'm supportive, and I love to see that. Just like I love to see other African-American women who are, you know, making it happen. There is a sisterhood around that, which I'm very proud to be a part of, and proud to be an example for other people to look at and see what they can achieve. So those things all really matter to me. But, you know, I also celebrate our differences. You know, like Colombia has an amazing history as being one of the largest slave ports, right, in the world. Most people don't really talk about that or know that, but that was a giant part of the, you know, the African experience as well. So I love that culture, and how it's inspired their culture, from music to food to dance, is so powerful. And, you know, so I love what we share in many ways, but I also love the things that that make us unique.
Yeah, I think it's about celebrating our commonalities, right? So there's aspects of the language that are common, but there's aspects of the language that are very different as well. And the same with the foods and with so many other things, that if we're able to both celebrate how we come together, but also celebrate and appreciate our differences, then we form this beautiful picture, right? I always say that if everybody was the same, life would be really boring, right? So I also love hearing about other women, other Latino women succeeding, and letting people know that it is possible. It is possible. We can do it. If I did it, and I was 14 when I moved on my own, then anybody can. Anybody can do it.
Right. So, I mean, I think this kind of encapsulates what we've been talking about, right? It's one name, but it's many, many different people. But for those who are disconnected for a variety of reasons, or not knowledgeable, this common cultural thread leads to all these assumptions, right? And all of these stereotypes about a single people that I guess what you're saying are not true, right?
Well, you know, if you look at the history, right, and the Spaniards, the Spaniards, looking at, you know, from Mexico down to Argentina, they came in, but the history of the different countries has been shaped by different things, and they were indigenous people who also shaped the different cultures, right? In Mexico is a big influence, in Colombia is a big influence, in Bolivia and in Paraguay and in Peru, there is a big influence. And then you have Argentina that had a significant influx of Europeans, and their culture was shaped differently, right? But we have that common thread of Spanish and that influence, and the African influence as well in the music and the foods. You're right, Christina. I mean, Colombia was a big port with the slaves coming through Cartagena, and that shaped our culture. So.
But I think, Donna, it speaks to what you're saying too about, like, you know, Hispanic Heritage Month and what purpose it serves. While I may not celebrate it, If it's an opportunity for exposure and education, as the slide says, then that's a good thing. So, you know, because we're not all the same. So the experience that Aide has is so different from mine and from Marta's. And if that's an opportunity for people to understand that someone from Latin America has had a different experience than someone from the Caribbean or someone from Mexico, that's a great chance that we have to sort of get into that discussion rather than paint everyone with the same brush.
Right.
And I have that the word actually, like the word Latina gets us in that box, but then we have to have that. It's almost kind of like a duty to change the mindset of people. And it's interesting because it's hard always to have to explain and come to the room and have to say that yeah, you're actually wrong. That box is wrong. Hello. but it's like part of being, I guess, a minority.
Right. All right. That's right. Living right. So we have a lot of talk about this about race as well. When you're living in a culture or society that where you're not the dominant, the responsibility to teach the dominant about who you are, and there's pressure in all of that, right? A lot of African American men and women will say, listen, I'm just over this. It's not my job to tell you who I am and what I do. And in a sense, I've heard that same comment, that same sense of pressure coming from Latina and Hispanic people. And yet, how else can you bridge the gap?
Google.
Well, you know, I think for me, because I love anything that is related to the way human beings act and behave.
Marta, can you speak a little? Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's sort of weird because I'm an engineer, but I'm incredibly intrigued by behavior. To me, it's about controlling what I can. And I can't control others, but I can control how I react and the impact that I have. So in my case, and I know this is very personal, in my case, I don't mind educating as long as, and Christina made this point in one of our conversations, as long as people are genuinely interested. Because they don't know what they don't know. And maybe I've had the chance to travel and see other cultures, and I have part of my teams that are in India and are in other parts of the world, and I learned so much from them, but other people have not had that chance. And sometimes the questions don't come out of ill intention. Sometimes the questions come out of not knowing and really wanting to make a difference, right? And I say that because I myself had to do a lot of learning coming to the US and finding the racial issues that I found. And so when all of this started to affect my teams, and I needed to understand where they were coming from. And I was the one asking the questions because I genuinely didn't understand. So while I was asking the question, it was also up to me to go and educate myself. But it's that interest that I look for.
So that's interesting. You say you didn't have any kind of feelings of racial differences in Canada, but you feel it in America.
I do. So in Toronto's like the United Nations, right? And while I'm not saying that there's no racism, because there is, it's very different from what I have experienced in Florida. So while in Florida, people expect you to be homogeneous and just fit in and be an American and don't relate to your culture. I would say that in Toronto is always about, hey, let's go and have some food in Greektown, and then you're in Greektown and you want to speak a little bit of Greek and you want to taste the Greek wine, and it's the same with Italians, and it's the same with Nigerians, and it's the same with Philippines and Chinese, and so there's a huge interest on culture and in what those cultures bring to the table. And so, you know, often you have at work potlucks and you're having tamales and samosas in the same plate, right? Because people really embrace and are interested in in the differences as opposed to saying you're bad or you're threatening to me because you're different from me. So coming to the US, and I've said this to my boss before, I said to him, yeah, I was not aware that I was Hispanic until I came to Florida. And then I understood that, you know, I was walking into stores and people were asking me if I could afford things, right? And so that was very different for me because it's not like that where I grew up, really.
Right. And Ida, you jumped from Florida to New York. Are you experiencing that differential?
Yeah, well, definitely. I guess Toronto and New York can relate in the sense of they're very just a melting pot, right? So people are used to people from different countries, cultures, and it's not even a thing. It's not even a part of the conversation. And so that was really nice. And it felt good just to be in the table and not have to explain my accent. And just small little things that with time, they drain you. And so like, if I constantly have to think about my accent and trying to speak a certain way so people understand, then I don't say what I really want to say. I'm just like more than anything worried that people don't ask me where I'm from or like I have to spend 20 minutes explaining it. But this doesn't happen here. Like I'm just like one of many. Like we're all like there's so many cultures. And so yeah, I saw the difference, and it's probably one of the reasons that I'm going to stay here, you know, for a long time.
Wow. That's so interesting. Let me just say this. Over here, Joy Kurtz says, there's some wonderful literature that helps us to know more about the various cultures. I just finished reading Isabel Allende, The Long Petal of the Sea. That's a good recommendation. We always like that. And then Kayla from JKO says, do you think the minority community or little ghetto towns have caused society to have a negative bias towards the Hispanic community? And how do you think you can reach to those who live in a predominant Hispanic community?
Well, sometimes people live in a predominant community, not out of choice, but out of necessity. So let's sort of put that out there first, that, you know, economic, you know, systemic, you know, people not being exposed to the right kind of economic opportunities that have, you know, made them have to make certain choices. So I think there's definitely some choice in wanting to be in a community that you feel comfortable in, but I think there's also unbelievable bias, and people do not have the freedom, unfortunately, to move in this country into any neighborhood that they'd like. So I don't know that it's the fault of the Hispanic community necessarily that happens.
Did you want to add to that, Ade?
No, I completely agree. It's not, and I don't think that, it's not because we want to stay in a certain neighborhood. It's not because of that. It's just the fact that we're not being allowed. So it's really goes back to like being allowed, and we've seen it, and it's still happening now. People not being able to purchase houses in certain neighborhoods, and the list goes on. So it takes a quick research. That's my thing, you know, like just research, just Google it, because that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, it's all over. We know it's still happening. It just takes 10 minutes of your time. And that's the part that I don't like to explain usually, because it's just a Google search away. It's not my story that I don't like to talk about. It's the fact that it's like, there's a lot of information out there. So if you're not reading, if you're not going after that information, then it shows more of the lack of interest already. If you're not coming already with a little bit of knowledge, then I already know that you really don't care. So yeah, I say research a little bit about like why, the reason behind people are not allowed or not being allowed in the past, or even like they have burned like complete neighborhoods that that they were here in the States, and they were really, they were really doing really great, and completely erased and put in another neighborhood. So yeah, sorry.
No. But you obviously there's deep feelings here, and this is important because we have lots of conversations like this. And Erin, our friend from Seattle, says these discussions are a good example of how problematic it is to say I don't see color, or we're all the same. We need to recognize differences and celebrate them. But I also want to say that the bandwidth, especially now, where I think our bandwidth is totally, it's constricted, right? We feel so much that compassionate people only have, like, you get up, you go to work. If you go to work, or you want to take care of your family, if you have a family, right? You watch a little TV, you repeat, right, rinse, and you go back and do the same thing the next day. And you want to just make sure that there's a health and safety around your family. You may not have time to really figure it out, but you stumble upon a Zoom like this, right? And all of a sudden there's these three amazing women, and they have great stories, and they're from different parts of the world, and they're willing to share with us things, and not by looking it up on Google, right? Because Google doesn't speak to me or look like you, Ade, right? You speak to me with your heart, right? As does Christina, and as does Marta. And all of a sudden now, guess what? There's all these people who have now engaged in a community they would not have otherwise. And I think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah. There's a ton of value to that. I mean, I think there's an incredible amount of value to that, but I also think that thankfully, I think the people who are here with us today all share a certain amount of curiosity and a willingness to sort of engage in the conversation. And yes, these are hard conversations to have, but I think to me, what I hear Ade saying is, meet me someplace. Don't make me do all the work. That's all. And whether that means Google or whatever, but it's just like, meet me open instead of, I gotta, carry all the water in this, and I don't know who it was that was saying, about like saying you don't see color. I mean, Donna knows this story, but I had a very unfortunate experience around that with her. And, it was so hurtful to me because I want you to see my color. I want you to see what makes me different and unique. It's not a compliment to tell me that you don't see color. That means you don't see me. So I think it's okay for us to embrace our differences and celebrate them and, learn from them rather than try and sort of make it, it's everything being, like you said, if we were all the same, that'd be really boring. So let's just find ways to embrace what makes us, what we each bring to every situation.
I think that for me anyway, my experience, especially with all the social unrest in the States, is it something that triggers some thoughts, Christina, and it's curiosity. I was worried and I was curious, and I knew that I didn't understand completely. And so I started looking for people who I could safely ask questions. And then they said to me, go watch this documentary and then we'll talk. And I would go and I would watch the documentary, and then I would come back and I would talk. And I think that's the openness that we need to get into the conversation. So I understand what Ida is saying. It's don't make me do all the legwork. But sometimes people don't know, right? And Google, like Donna said, doesn't have sentiment and passion and can't trigger that interest. But I do agree that people have to show that disposition to learn and to understand. And for me, it was very interesting to learn about American history and understand why people were feeling the way they were feeling. And things sometimes explaining a way that I was like, oh, I never thought about it like that, right? Because I was removed and I grew up in a different environment. When I was in Colombia, everybody was Colombian. And then when I was living here in Canada, then, everybody just was interested in everybody else. And we saw the differences, but we saw the human beings, right? So being in the States has been very, very different for me.
So can I bring this up? It's kind of sensitive. And Joy, I definitely want to talk about American Dirt for sure. And Stacy has a great question. But and Christina and I did experience that night together. And I still think about it and I still talk about it. we don't really know how to talk to each other. Men don't know how to talk to women in terms of gendered conversation. Women may have some trouble back, but not in the same way. If you're with a Black person, what can I ask and what can I say? What is in the realm of acceptability? If I asked you where you're from, is that a bad question or a good question? So there's so much social pressure on being right and correct. And when you even have an earnest way of wanting to engage, there's a fear of not wanting to offend. And when you think about that, it keeps us apart. So while I hear and I deeply understand, I think is bringing up a fantastic point and one that a lot of people feel, don't make me do all the work. But there are people who really want to know, who don't even know what the work is, or don't even know how to bridge that gap, but will be enriched if they do. And so the question is, how do you do that? Christina, ever since we became friends for 1,000,000 years ago, right? We've always talked about these issues. We've never shied away. From the moment I met you, Marta, we've always talked about these issues, right? So but they're hard. And how do people are able to? They're hard because everybody's very judgmental. If you don't meet me halfway, then I don't really want to meet you. And I'm saying, okay, I appreciate that. And I get that. And I understand the pressure. But there are a lot of people who do want to meet you, but haven't put the work in, or you can, by your approaching them, can bring them to you. Now, you might not be interested in your life. You're saying, hey, listen, I have enough people. I don't need to do that. I get that. I get that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. I totally understand where you're coming from. But I also want to point that there is definitely a openness in every single Latino, Latinx person of Latin America to talk and just, share their culture, share their information. I mean, if you know a Latina, you know that she's ready. There's no question about that. What I am coming from is more of the history of America.
Yes, understand.
And so it takes really not that long to just get some of the facts straight, and that's it. And then we can just
that's true. But you think about what we're dealing with now in terms of social justice and Black America, right? 400 years of slavery, and people, especially white people, are having incredible aha moments. And I guess when I think about how many times, whether it has to do with race or anything, there's an aha moment. Like, how many times have you said to yourself, I never would have thought of that, or I didn't know that? It happens all the time. And it's because we're on different tracks, different parts of the day, and all of a sudden there's something that hits us. And you're like, and then all of a sudden you're drawn into saying, I want to know more about that. And I'm not saying specifically whether it's about Hispanics or Latinas or Blacks or whatever.
No, you're so right.
How life gets discovered every day in the most obvious ways that you go, oh my God, I never thought of that.
It happens to me all the time. Like, I think I know something, and then boom, I'm like, ooh, I didn't know that was a racist thing to say, or I didn't know this or that. Yeah, I'm always constantly learning. It happens all the time. And this time that we've been inside, that we've been in quarantine, it's been one after another one, which is great. I mean, I think it's happening to everybody in America. So I'm really excited about later how we're gonna deal with everything. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, you said something. Sorry, Christina, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marta.
No, Donna, you said something that resonated with me, because you came to FIS to talk to us about gender and gender equality, and some of the comments that I got from some of the men were what language do we use? Do you get offended if I go into the room and I say, hey guys? Right. And so I get that all the time, because I've been a woman in a male dominated industry, and I'm not I'm a girly girl. So that also throws them off a little bit, because I can be very soft, or I can be very aggressive, and they don't know how to take me sometimes. But I think it's interesting that they don't know how to communicate with me, right? And so that highlights that point that you brought up.
Right, Christina. Totally.
There's something in the chat that talks about how it's not easy to have these conversations. There's a lot of fear, and I think that we are all not well. Like, you know, that there's a vulnerability that is required for these kinds of conversations, and we've spent so much time putting up walls that we don't really want to have that. And you have to me, I'm thinking about the ways in which language has changed. You were talking about that. There were so many things. You know, when you think about, there were so many negative phrases that we used around Native Americans in this country, right? Somebody was an Indian giver or something, like the really hurtful things. But somebody stood up and said, no, that's not okay anymore. And over time, we've been able to sort of change the way that we have that conversation. So I do think that there has to be a willingness to say, I don't know if this is right, but like, how do you start off with a, hey, I don't want to offend you, but like you said, like, is it okay for me? You know, does guys offend you or whatever? You know, I have two 20-something daughters, and they are very useful and helpful in correcting me around things like gender and gender identity. And there are things that are new for me to be talking about as well. So I kind of feel like, you know, we definitely got to look to the younger generation, because they are embracing difference in a way that we didn't. And that is just, you know, your kids' friends are, I hope anyway, the rainbow that we were all sort of promised. And I think looking to that and seeing how they navigate through things is really instructive for us as well.
Totally. And I want to thank Megan Tobin for she posted, we can get this out also on Facebook, a list of readings, and she just is very appreciative for these conversations. And we do need to create a better history and conversations like this. And then Joy Kurtz, who's an educator, came back and she says, she's thinking about how we taught history. Basically, we never teach Latin American history.
Well, we barely teach American history.
Or South American history, or even talked about it.
Yeah.
And I talked on a panel last week about race and was like, we don't, and I actually took African history when I was in college. I just thought it'd be interesting. It never dawned on me that I would be the only white kid in the class. It didn't matter to me either, right? But the point is in America, it shouldn't be Black history and white history. It's American history, and we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, and Donna.
And she went on to say, other than talk about it, she says, here's Mexico. That's our Mexican knowledge, okay, just so you know. And they have, they have tacos, and we have dogs that came from Chihuahua. Matter of fact, you know, I have two of them sitting here with me right now. We have two Latina dogs that I brought in specially for today's conversation. They haven't added very much yet, but okay.
Everybody that speaks Spanish is from Mexico too. Remember that.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So here's a chance. Stacy threw this up and said, hey, here we are. I hope this question's okay. What does American society get wrong about Latinas and Hispanics that you would like to say, hey? I mean, Idea, you said, listen, I'd like you to know about the history of our communities, right? Because there's multiple communities, right?
Right.
Guys,
I can go.
I would like you to understand that my experience is different from yours. That doesn't make it worse or better, but it is different from yours. I've had to deal with things that you have not had. We haven't walked in each other's shoes. So I think by having that understanding going into things, I think is useful and important, so that you don't make the same sort of assumptions about my path versus your path. So I think that would be a great place to start, is to, again, like, I feel like a broken record, but like, acknowledge the differences and not make assumptions about what they mean. Just because I am a Puerto Rican doesn't mean, you know, first of all, in my case, I don't speak Spanish. So I was not raised in a Spanish dominant household. So that's a misconception. You know, I don't, you know, I'm not from a teenage mother, you know, like a lot of stereotypes, I think. So how do you sort of come again with that sort of openness and that curiosity, and not making assumptions about what all sorts of signs around us have led us to believe about other cultures?
I think that's great. I wish we have our high school kids on the chat here, and if any of them want to just tell, feel free to send us a little note. Tell us about your experience living in New York City today as we talk about these issues. We'd love to hear them. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Or Marta, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So two things. One, talking about history. I want us to think about, the Quakers came to North America with the intention of settling, right? And the Spaniards went to Central, South America, and the Caribbean with the intention of getting things and going back to Spain with gold or with produce or whatever it was, right? That in itself made South America and Central America develop very different from North America. So understanding that history and understanding the mentality, it's very important. I think for me as a Colombian, because I left when I was 14 and then I moved to Canada, I think the biggest misconception is that, and Christina, that this is along the lines of what you were saying, is that we look like this, we fit a mold, and we're just like people in North America, we're just like people in the US. We have doctors, entrepreneurs, we have farmers, we have pharmacists, we have teachers, we have buildings in big cities and technology. And so this misconception of people being less in my mind, I think that's one of the things that I struggle with. So you're Latina or you are Latino or Latinx, and therefore there's this job classification where you fit. I think that's the piece that bothers me the most, to be honest, because I think that, I go to Bogota and it's a cosmopolitan city, right? It's congested, there's traffic, there's people with money, there's people with no money, there's doctors, there's people with no education. So I think we have the same here in North America, right? Perhaps in North America, there's more opportunity. And that's the biggest difference that I see, is that there is a lot more opportunity, the economy is stronger, but I think being pegged into this specific echelon of the world, I think that's what bothers me.
I think that the one thing that we have gotten wrong is actually the fact that being a Latina is not a race. So we are getting it confused often. And so we really have not fit in America. We still don't have a race defined by Latinos. We're just Latino definition, people that come from Latin America. That's it. So we're mestizo, we're a mix of people. We have Spaniard, we have Indian, we have we're mats. And so I think knowing that we are all mats, and knowing when you meet us that we're all mats, we have different cultures, and it's so rich and at the same time so big, and every single person is like that. It's just it's big, but it's a mud completely. So my hope is in the future we take the word Latina out and we have an actual definition by who we are, or I don't know, like mestizo or something that it actually embodies race, not just where we come from.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, and that's really important. And let me ask you this. We don't have much time left. Do you guys feel like role models?
I hope so.
I hope so too. I hope so too.
And what do you want to project? What would you, as a role model, what do you want to project? What message would you like to leave other young, either Puerto Rican American, Mexican American, Canadian, Colombian American, actually tech savvy women?
So for me, I think it's important that the image that I portray is that you can do anything. I work in one of the top fintech companies for the COO, and I started at 14, moving by myself, not knowing what to do, and working really hard to go to university. There were days where I had to choose, do I take the train or do I have breakfast? And I think if I was able to do that, then anybody can take the opportunities, be positive, think about what you can change, what you can control, and the impact that you have on others. And sky's the limit, right? Go for it. Whatever you want to do, whatever it is that you're passionate about, it's about you and what you enjoy and how you determine success.
Yeah, I guess I would say I definitely feel like a role model, and I have been fortunate enough to have people in my life who set an example and paved a way that allow me to be here. So I know I stand on other people's shoulders. And I guess what I would say is, there was like, I ended up with a career in media and entertainment. I've had jobs I didn't even know were jobs and that you could have. So again, it's about curiosity. It's about really opening your mind to what the possibilities are, as Marta is saying. So, there are so many things in the world that you can be, and not to limit yourself to what those are, to talk to everyone, to not, to see a closed door as something that you can find a way to open rather than as a barrier that keeps you out. Because there, if I would have known now what I knew, whatever that phrase is, but I might have made different choices and gone down a different path. But I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've had and the exposure that I've had. And that's what's led me here. So take every opportunity to expose yourself to something new.
I mean,
go ahead, Ajay.
No, definitely. Yeah. Exposure is a huge one, but I would say that just education, and it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree if you don't want to, but like just go after education, and it's going to open lots of doors for you, and your dreams are gonna be easier because education.
Yeah. So you see here, Kayla in the chat, we're going to close with this, and maybe one of you can respond, because it's all three of you are speaking about this. But I think this is just so beautiful. I'm Dominican and Guyanese. I don't speak Spanish. Wasn't raised in a Spanish home. I'm still being raised in a West Indian home. But I wanted to say and ask sort of, was that because of my completion and how I speak?
Complexion.
Huh?
Complexion.
Oh, my complexion, thanks. I was accepted or approved by people. I lived in the Bronx my whole life, so she's a kindred spirit there, Christina. I feel education's the best ammunition a person can have. Knowledge is power. All three of you have said that. No matter how racist the world is, we can fight through it by educating ourselves. So my question is, do you think by having a struggle because of your background helped you be where you are today? So is that part of your fighting spirit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. I mean, having the experiences that we've all had, they're building blocks that have formed who you are. And, I think that having to fight through people's perceptions of who you are and what you could do and where you belong are, definitely have been fuel for me.
Yeah. In my case, I always, when I'm facing a struggle, I always think, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? If I learn what I'm supposed to be learning now, then I'll go through that painful experience or that negative experience faster. But I do think that the struggles have shaped my character and have given me a different perspective and made me who I am.
Yeah, the struggles made me kinder, just nicer, just a better human being, because otherwise, mean person.
I don't know. We're not feeling your meanness at all, Ajay, but thank you for sharing that. And Kayla, thank you, and all of your classmates, and Karen, your teacher. Debbie Banks, it's always great that you're with us. Joy, for all of your suggestions of books. By the last one she recommended was American Dirt. I don't know if anybody has read it. I thought it was an amazing book to read about the I guess, the immigrant or immigration experience, right? Coming from Mexico, trying to get through the border. Fantastic. Lisa Tepper for your heart, Marion for all of your comments. Hey, Perrin, I didn't know you're with us. And Trish Melly, I do hope that we have met your expectation for high energy today. All right. Let me just say this. I always write down things you guys say that I always like us to remember. And all of you said so many, so this is hard, but this one just stuck out. We are all mutts. I just love that, right? Because we recognize all the differences within us, then we should be able to recognize all of the differences outside of us, because, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing. Marta, who told us to take the opportunity to be positive and sky's the limit. And Christina said, there's so many things in the world that we can be and that we should go try and achieve them. And God knows, Christina, you have done so many of those and done them so incredibly well. For next week, by the way, do you realize between now and next week, the election would have happened? Is anybody else a little eager, anxious, or curious about it? I think we all are. But in the spirit of taking it easy on myself, on ourselves, remember that was the opening offering of a prescription, I thought maybe some of you can help us decide how you'd like to spend next Wednesday. We have had several discussions on what would be the best thing we can do. Should we bring in a therapist to kind of calm our emotional ills? Should we talk about positivity, how good everything is, because that's within us? So anyway, just let us know what you think. But we will have some special guests. We thought an open conversation on how we can contribute to the greater good would probably be a good place to be. We know we like to be together. We know we appreciate the positive energy. So listen, don't be shy. Let us know. All right. info@genwnow.com. And till then, I want to thank our Gen W team, our producers, Sherry Levin and Jamie Valet, our entire team. I love the conversations we're having, everybody. More to continue tomorrow. Stacy, Kasha, Christina, Tara, Ruth, and Mariah. And remember, if you know a teen girl, and this is all for the kids in JKO too, who's looking for a fun and energizing hour, a chance to be in a safe space and meet other great girls, please connect them with our WOW team. Generation WOW has a virtual club every single week on Wednesdays in the afternoon. The feedback we get is really remarkable. It's a place you can feel good. And we all need a place to feel good and a place to take it easy on ourselves, right? So Ide, I love seeing you, and I am thrilled, we all are, with the success, your bright shininess that you're bringing to New York City. Marta, I know you're in Canada now, but we'll look forward to welcoming you back for all the great work and how you stand up to be counted and shine every single day. And Christina, just being the amazing stalwart that you are for love, humanity, and friendship. So thank you all today for being with us, and have a great week. If you have not voted, it's the most important thing you can do in the next 5 days. That, and take it easy on yourself. Bye, everyone.